Hello and welcome everybody, my name is Strawberrian and I will show you, as I promised, how to move on from a wire armature to a finished sculpt like this. This is not finished because obviously the hands are still missing, and one more thing that I want to mention before I start. I am cutting off the legs here because it's going to be part of a set of these girls, and they're sort of like half figures or busts and not complete miniatures, but it doesn't change much. I showed you in the last video that I put the armature into some cork. Actually, this is the armature I used. And it's just the same with this one. I did that one practically the same as the other one. So for the next steps, we're going to need our armature, obviously, and some sort of air drying epoxy clay. And personally, I use Milliput standard yellow gray. It's a two-component epoxy clay or putty that you can buy for about 10 to 12 euros, probably a bit more in dollars. And what I'm going to do, I take two pieces of each of the rolls that are about the same. And what I do with this type, I usually just get rid of the brown coating and just pick from the inside. Otherwise it's getting to well, you will have these things not mixing properly, and that kinda can be annoying. It's not that much of a deal when doing armatures, but if you're doing more refined stuff, then that can be annoying. So just taking roughly the same amount out of both rolls. Milliput can be stored in a I just you can store them in the plastic bags, and I put them in the fridge as well. I don't know if it's really that much different, but if you have space in your fridge, you can just keep it there. No big deal. So every time I'm mixing Milliput, I just start like this, because the gray part isn't as sticky as the yellow-green one. So just mixing that one. Just mixing everything together. And that's already starting to get homogeneous. Doesn't take too long, but a few rolls like that, then make it a ball again and roll it like that again. Usually does the trick for me. So yeah, looks homogeneous enough, especially for this purpose. And what we're going to do is we are creating a base that we can stick the polymer clay on, because if you were using polymer clay on a wire that thin, what you would do is you'd either put it on. First of all, it doesn't stick very well, so you would put it on, and if you push too hard, you would cut it through. Or if you were more careful and you would put it on, you would have stuff like that going on. So for it to better stick, and it not being cut in half, we'll actually start with the milliput instead of the polymer clay. Two things: sometimes you will have this area be wobbly a bit because the super glue isn't holding it together too well. But of course it's helped in place by the thinner wire we used. Anyway, first of all, what I usually do is I apply some milliput here, so we get rid of this wobble effect. And what I'm using to apply this is usually just a wooden stick. You can slightly dab it on, carefully dab it on, and shape it. And also you can just use your fingers. What I forgot to say is after mixing I usually wash my fingers because it's not the healthiest product on earth. But for these purposes I will just go on like that. Some people will want to wear gloves, especially if you're experiencing discomfort and itching and stuff like that when you're working with these types of clay. But for these steps, I usually don't do it. I just wash my hands after mixing, and then it's just slightly touching the material. So this is the first thing I usually do. If you want to be extra careful, you could put it in the oven for a few minutes, like 20 minutes at 70 degrees Celsius to pre-dry that a bit, but that's not a must. So the next thing that I'm adding is the hip area. To give it a bit of stability here as well. And the last major thing we will want to add a base for our head. So just press that on and make the round area point backwards a bit. And the more you already know where your miniature is going to be looking at in the end, the better, because if you know that, you can already have this piece be rather big, because the more tiny you make it, the more you will have the clay actually move on top of that. Whatever you do, if you haven't decided yet, you can, after it's dried, you can cut it down a bit and so on. But anyway, I will push it flat a bit, so whatever you do, never do something like this for a head. You know, like a rod on top of the armature, because here you will have the clay moving like crazy, and you don't want that. So here in the middle, I will just add a thinner layer. Like this, and here you really don't have to be too careful. Just roll it on with your stick and roll it here. And what I'm trying to do is I will not cover the areas where the wires join together too much. You will see it at the shoulder and the elbow and the knee. Oh well, the hip, because the knee, that won't be too much clay covering that, since we don't have anything below the knee. So just cover most of the wire gently. Don't use too much volume. And you can see here I leave out this area, so what that will allow me to do is, once I covered everything, even if I'm not satisfied with the pose, I can still reposition the model. I'm also going to cover the neck area, and usually what I do is I roll out a piece that is just as long as the neck. Cut it off if you have to, and put it on. And roll it out really thin. So yeah, for demonstration purposes, I didn't bake this area here yet, and that's why the arms are still moving a bit. What you can do is, you can, shortly before you start this, just add another drop of super glue here. That way it won't move too much. Okay, so back here, this area is not too tragic. It's not covered by any of the mini put, but this area here is already rather thick. I will maybe just give it still give it one pass, because this is gonna be really thin anyway. Okay. And washing your hands at this point will make a lot of sense at the latest, because now you're going to add the milliput to the really delicate areas of the armature. And here I just do the same. I roll out a piece of milliput like that, and when you wash your hands it doesn't stick as much to your hands as it does to the armature. And just press it on here and make sure you cover it in one round, or all around like that. You can use your fingers or a tool. I feel like I have more control with my fingers at this point. Like I said, you can carefully roll on the clay with a tool like that, but you will have to find out what's working better for you or best for you. So down here I will also give it a bit of a thicker piece of milliput. That can be a bit tricky when you're doing feet, but this helps me to not have always try to get fresh milliput, because I think this one is a bit older and it already gets brittle. Anyway, down here I will have a larger surface at the end that's in contact with the cork, so I have so it doesn't move too much. That's always helpful. Just roll it on. Well, something's going on here. It's not sticking. Like it's supposed to. Weird. Okay. Try it again. Just prefers to stick to my tool. Okay, let's do the other leg. Really quickly, and as you can see here, I didn't cover this joint, so I can reposition the legs And I will do the same here. Cover most of the leg. Again, it doesn't. Don't be worried too much if you don't cover everything. Just create enough so that the polymer clay has some area to stick to. And also, this is a larger scale project, and you can see that the legs will be covered a lot, so you don't have to work too delicate. But the smaller your scale goes, the more you have to take care of that. And one example is my sci-fi pilot, where you have really delicate limbs, and you can imagine that I only took really thin layers of milliput below that, and it even shows in some areas. Here you can see the yellow shine through, the yellow of the milliput. So moving on to the arms. This will be a bit annoying because it's moving, but even if you forget to apply the super glue after it's dry, it should not be moving anymore. And you will see that in the next video. Okay, here I try to be more delicate so you can figure how it works for smaller pieces. Yeah, milliput can be a bit frustrating to apply. Don't get discouraged by that. Make sure you take your time and don't like me. I will rush it a bit for the video. Again, here I will not cover the joint of the elbow. So if I'm unhappy with the pose, I can just reposition it. And one thing I will add at the moment, I will just measure the length of the lower arm, roughly. You can always do that by having your anatomy reference next to you, the one I showed you in the first picture. But I'm using this miniature because it's the same scale anyway. Alright, and what I'm going to do is I want to add a hand here that's holding a mantle, and that's why I will already apply some of that volume of the hand here as well. So if you know that you're going to do a hand here, you can already add that. For this model, I'm going to give her a hammer, and she's going to hold it like that. And that's why I want to do it separately, because otherwise it couldn't be cast. If you don't want to cast your pieces, just sculpt them for yourself. You can, of course, sculpt them all in one piece. Just glue the hammer on and sculpt the hands around that. It's really up to you, but you will need a bit of planning before you start your miniature, whether you're going to cast it or not. So always keep that in mind before you cut off pieces of your armature and so on. Alright, almost there. Gonna do the upper arm. And like I said, you don't have to be too delicate in the larger scales, but whatever you do, try to close the whole thing around your armature. So if you turn that around, make sure that no armature is showing through. It's not as much as a big deal down here, so this is okay. This little bit showing through, but it should be closed at the majority of your armature, simply because it will start coming off if you don't do it. Almost there. Last piece. The lower arm here. Of course, that wants to be special. Always wash your hands in between again, so you can make sure that none of the material sticks to your fingers and then pulls off. Something that also helps is you can smooth out the milliput with some water. Don't use too much, because it will dissolve the milliput, but I'm just dipping my hands into a bit of water, and then I can smooth that out pretty well. Okay, and here I'm not sure if I want to add a hand. Probably will give her a sword that's gonna be cast separately. So I'll just leave that, just taking the measure again, how long the lower arm will have to be. Okay, I covered more than it needs to be, but I can always cut away. Adding is possible as well, but this is probably more of a pain. So one more thing that you can stop here and apply your polymer clay. Something that I personally do is I will add a bit more volume on the sides of this area, because I feel it makes my armatures more stable, as in as in I have a more solid base for the chest and the rib cage. Just gonna fix that. Gonna add a bit more. And I will make this really thin because I don't want to have too much volume to either the back or the front. And just this one more piece. And you can do the same down here, obviously. If you get leftovers, you can carefully attach them to areas where you would want initial volumes anyway. You know, here we would have the rib cage and stuff like that. But if you're not experienced enough, just stop here and leave that out to dry. Once it's dry, it will look like this. But you can still move the arms. I will not do it because I'm kind of happy with this pose for the next sculpt I'm going to do here. But yeah. Hope you found that interesting. If you got any questions, feel free to post them below the stream in the comments. Don't forget that I'm live from Monday to Tuesday at the moment on Twitch. I will provide the link below. But for now, thanks for watching and see you next time.